The Dynasty Friendzone. What does that mean? A Dynasty situationship. What does that mean? To us, aka it is being stuck in the middle. You are not at the very top, but you are not positioned to absolutely suck and be at the very bottom. So you're in the middle. Shout out to listener, commenter, subscriber, all of the three. Chris Matthew 2767 for this topic. Shane, we're in the friend zone. What do you do if your dynasty team is also there? AKA, we'll define it as, what is it? 4th place through 9th place. You are in the middle, but you're not top or bottom 3.
4th place is much closer to the, I guess, boyfriend-girlfriend relationship zone than 9th. 9th, you're definitely like, you're an afterthought almost. So it's kind of like 6, 7, 8, right? Like you're just good enough to get noticed, but not good enough to get like anything from being noticed. And just so before anyone tries any of these things, fantasy football ideas are not relatable exactly to real life ideas. So if I tell you to do something crazy in fantasy football, that doesn't mean go, start a fire on someone's lawn that says, I love you, because that will probably get you arrested. So whatever, just don't go too crazy with those ideas. Like fun things like, oh, you took her on a balloon ride or something. I don't know. Maybe that would be fun to someone. Anyway, so the friend zone to me, yeah, it's definitely somewhere between like 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th. Just good enough every year. You're just not doing enough. You need a little more push, or you need to look at the situation and go, you know what? This is as good as it's going to get, and it's not going to get any better. And I need to just rethink how I'm doing this whole thing and blow this squad up and start from scratch almost. So I guess the first thing you're going to need to do is figure out, are you actually closer to the top or are you closer to the bottom?
So how do you define, if you're asking yourself that question, because we probably have some people that are going into this year asking themselves that question. They have a middle tier team. You can use a site like Dynasty Daddy just to kind of get a rough idea of where you stand in your league. If you look, and don't be swayed, because Dynasty Daddy obviously is measuring something slightly different than what you're trying to focus on for 2023. But if you sit there and you go, wow, everything on Dynasty Daddy, it has me ranked between 5 and 7. You're right up the middle, right? You don't have extra picks going forward. You're not stacked with draft capital. You pretty much have a middling room at every position. Like literally, you're just right down the middle. You're top 6 in everything, but maybe you have no first round pick going forward. Whatever it might be, you've identified that yourself, you're stuck in the middle. What other things are you looking at to determine which direction you're going to pick? Is it based on draft capital? Is it based on obviously the format, how many starters you feel really good about? Is it also just based on assets as well? Because we've seen some teams where, yeah, they're probably good enough to finish top 3 or 4, maybe higher, but they are working on such slim margins that it almost doesn't make sense. And if you look at everything as a whole, you're like, damn, that might be a top 3 lineup, but it has no room for error. 0. It has nothing to pivot off to. It has no value in the future in terms of picks that it can move anything for. So it's really like it's a fake 3rd or 4th, like it's 3rd or 4th, but a couple of things go wrong and it's in the middle right away. So, I mean, what do you look for to determine?
That's probably the first thing, right? Like, how flexible am I? How much can I bend? If something happens, am I able to address it in season? Like you were saying, those thin margins. There's tons of teams we've seen where we go, oof, 1 injury away. And I feel like, yeah, sure, you could say that about a lot of teams, but it's not true. 1 injury won't decimate a lot of teams. And if you have flexibility, if you have future picks, future assets, multiple young players with some market value, if something were to occur, you could make a move where you could recover from that. But we're talking about teams like you said. If I have a team that has no real trade assets, and we've seen those where you have 2nd round picks, 3rd round picks, for some reason you traded your 25 round first round pick. I'd say those teams looking at that, and obviously it's looking at everything together in totality, right? I'm looking at the roster too. So if I've got Josh Allen and Patrick Mahomes at quarterback, I'm probably thinking I'm a little closer to the top than I am the bottom, and there's less of a chance I need to blow it up. Unless, of course, then I look at my running back room and I'm starting DJ Dallas and Travis Homer and hoping that I don't even remember his name now. The guy from Washington comes back, the pass catching guy, not Brian Robinson, not Antonio Gibson,
JD McKissick.
JD McKissick. You're like, look, if JD McKissick doesn't come back, I'm in a little bit of trouble, right? You're starting your wide receivers are Jerry Jeudy, DJ Moore, Chase Claypool. Then at that point, it might be time to like look at those 2 quarterbacks and go, what can I make out of you? What kind of haul can I get back? But yeah, I guess I'm looking at it in totality. But yeah, the first indicator that it's probably closer to a rebuild is the fact that I don't have assets than the other way around. When I have assets, I can be in buying mode, even if I'm mediocre. There's things I can do to make myself unmediocre, if that's a word.
Well, so I'll give 2 examples to what you said. So first, if you have like Patrick Mahomes and Josh Allen, and then you're weak everywhere else, there's really no such thing as a non-contending team that has those two. You can just put in replacement level players and you probably have a chance to kind of maintain. Now, if that's all you have, then you're probably sitting there going, okay, those are probably the assets that I have to turn into a split, and I have to try to figure out how to get 2 assets. Now, you have to just be very careful. If you're starting at the top of the value tier like that, you have to be careful what you split them into. You don't want to split them too thin, and then you go, man, I took away the advantage that I had, and now I really just have 2 other assets, because you still don't have enough to win. It's not like you were 1 player away and you needed a split to get to that number. You're still probably way short, and you're left without a stud that you can maybe split later if a better opportunity comes up. So that's the first scenario. The second scenario is you have to consider that if you are wanting to split and things go badly, how far down can you get? I've had a lot of teams where maybe I am 4th or 5th best team in the league. And even if I've kept my own first, how bad can my first get realistically if I purposely try to do everything to sabotage my team? So it's almost like you're looking at your upside, not just how far away am I from everything unraveling, but how far am I away from realistically getting to the bottom? For as many teams as you say, they have good talent, good depth, extra picks, they have some insulation. They have a lot of things that need to go wrong before they fall out of the top 3 or 4. There's just as many teams typically that have absolutely no way to get out of the bottom 3. So it's going to be very hard for you to catch those teams if you just have a couple studs and you have 2 or 3 other good players. Sure, you may not be ready to win, but I'll look at the team and I'll go, Shane, I can't see a way I can get into the bottom 3 here. Maybe I can get 3rd or 4th, but like I'm just going to end up missing the playoffs. I'm going to be 104 or 105, but I can't deplete my team enough to get to the very bottom unless I literally trade away absolutely everything. And if that includes a Mahomes or an Allen just to get to the bottom, it feels like that really doesn't make sense. So I think you also have to assess, or how do you assess how far down I can go? Because if it's not far enough, what's the point?
That's the other thing, right? So in a start 9, here's one of the things I guess we don't talk about a lot. It's going to be harder to destroy a start 9 if you have some studs on it already. Like, it's just going to be, like you said, like if we just have Josh Allen and Patrick Mahomes at quarterback, Jalen Hurts, Lamar Jackson at quarterback, it's going to be a lot harder to bottom that team out than it would be in a start 10, start 11. Start 11, I could bottom that out easy. And I've done that before where I've gone, all right, I'm doing a hard reset with this. My only 2 good players are going to be Jalen Hurts and Deshaun Watson, and I'll get the rest because I'm rebuilding. As usual, the first thing we always look at is the quarterback, right? If your quarterbacks are bad, it's easy to tank to the bottom. It's a lot easier to do, even if your wide receivers are good, because then you can blow up holes in the other spots, like running backs, whatever. Every running back I'll have on my depth chart is going to be the 3rd or 4th on the NFL team's depth chart. And as soon as they do anything, I just move them. You know, any wide receivers over the age of 26, 27 that I can get a tier down in the first on, I'm going to do. But yeah, it does get really difficult with the quarterback, and it's almost like you're going to have to accept the fact that the worst you can probably do in some cases is the 103, 104. Bright side of that is if you have strong quarterbacks, you can survive rebuilding right there, because 103, 104 is where you're usually going to get the elite wide receiver running back of the class in the normal class. You know, obviously not in a class like last year where Bijan was the 101. But if you do have those elite quarterbacks, I'd say the best you're probably shooting for is 103, 104. But again, that's not that bad, because then it's a quick rebuild. Hopefully you get wide receivers, or if you know, you're feeling frisky, running backs, and just load up for the next year and be ready to go.
Yeah, there's a big difference between a team that is quote unquote tanking, but they also have an at least one elite quarterback, maybe more than one, or they have enough quarterbacks. When you don't have that, there's pressure to try to get to as far down to the bottom as possible, which means you're probably willing to trade everything other than maybe you have an elite receiver that's really young, but like pretty much everything else can go. So I think you already know that. If you're in a super flex, you probably already know if, hey, am I going to need another quarterback? And if so, if you say I clearly am going to need a better quarterback, that's when you say, okay, I'm going to try to get my pick to the bottom. If I'm sitting on a decent QB room, maybe I have a stud, then I have a couple other players. Maybe I have a younger guy like a Bryce Young and a Josh Allen or something. I don't have to get to the bottom. I'd like to get to the bottom if I'm tanking. I'd love to get the 101 just because I now have it. But it's not like, man, that this is going to make or break whether I can get back in the next year or two. Is I have to get a quarterback in next year's draft. And I don't have the assets to go, oh, it's okay if I get the 104. I'll just trade up to the 102 because the team probably wants an extra first if it's a good quarterback. So you're kind of sitting there like, man, I really need to get to the bottom. So I think that's a big assessment you have to make is regardless of where you stand. If you stand in the middle to the top end of that range, you really do have to have an assessment of how far high up can I go? Do I have any flexibility like you started off talking about? And if I don't, and I'm just like, man, I'm just going to be stuck at the fourth best team in this league and I don't have any picks. But then you look and you go, wow, there's already 4 teams tanking. They've already traded for an extra first each. They've sold off every player they have. I can't get below the 104. So it's like, okay, I'm now pigeonholed in the middle. At that point, I might as well just let it ride out. I might as well trade whatever I have that I can move in the future to see if I can make like a, hey, maybe I make the playoffs, I get lucky, and I finish second place and I win my money back or whatever it might be. Let's say you've identified that. You do not want to push to the bottom because you think it's just going to be just as hard to go to the bottom in your league than it is to get to the top, because the top can be based on variance, right?
Right.
The bottom can just be, man, Shane has the team. He literally doesn't have anybody. So I'm not going to be able to catch him because his team is so bad and he has 7 firsts next year. So there isn't a way to catch him. You are going to finish ahead of him in the standings. But let's assume now you have a couple assets. Maybe you have your future picks, but you are dead in the middle. That's my next question. You can finish your point, but that's my next question. You're the team in the middle. This is the time to kind of put up and shut up. Maybe you make a big bet. Maybe you go to another one of the middle teams, see if you both want to make a risky trade with each other and see what happens. But that's why I wanted to ask you, how aggressive are you if you are in that middle? How aggressive are you with like shopping some of your younger pieces or your picks for points?
I'd say I'm pretty aggressive. I'm fairly aggressive. I'm just an aggressive dude anyway. And you know what? It's more fun to be in the mix than not in the mix. Although there is something nice about going, this team's punting. I don't have to worry about it till next year. I'll set the lineup. It's getting set automatically on Fantasy Pros or whatever, but I'm never going to have to worry about that. But generally, if I'm in the middle, and this might be a me problem, close to the middle, I want to see what I can do to move up, right? And it might be incremental. It might be little things like, can I trade Drake London and something to get a wide receiver above him in his tier? What can I do at quarterback to upgrade my quarterback, and just making 1 or 2 tier moves right there? Adding someone like a Tyler Lockett as my wide receiver 4. In and of itself, right, these moves might not matter much. I like adding points to my roster, and I like adding players like a Tyler Lockett because based on their cost, I can get out on them in season for basically the same thing that I paid for them if it goes wrong, you know, and you should know fairly quickly in season. But even if you don't, and you're just middling the whole year, you make a decision again. It's a lot of decisions in Dynasty, man. You make a decision before the playoffs, or if you're in a league with trade deadlines because no one trusts you with sharp objects. Well, then you decide before the trade deadline, am I a team that's going to actually be able to win or not? And should I hold on to this piece, or should I just try to move it, even if it's at a slight loss of what I bought it for in the beginning of the year?
The biggest thing when you are one of those teams in the middle is you always have to be looking for what is the cheapest bang for my buck. Is there some points I can buy now where I'm actually fine if they're worth nothing later on? Because if I miss the window to sell them in the season, I'm likely just holding an asset into next offseason where I go, okay, they're just points. There's nothing liquid left in that piece. You have to take some risk. If you're 5th place and you only have 1 chip, which is your future first, and you haven't traded it, you need to make a big bet. You need to go, okay, I'm going to go with one of the other teams that's also in the middle, see if they're willing to make a risky trade with me. It could work out for me and blow up for them. It could blow up for me and it could be awesome for them. I may also have to go to the top teams and say, hey, I know you guys are stronger than me. I'm willing to give you a pick that could be bad if my team implodes, but I need some help now. And a lot of times that's what I'll do at the very top. But here, we're not at the top. We're in the middle. So you do have to take some risk. It's going to be uncomfortable. If you're in this spot, make sure you're truly in this spot. People will say, oh, man, I'm a middling team. But then I look at their team and I go, dude, your roster construction's terrible. You're holding a lot of bad players. You don't have enough running backs. You could easily go trade for another tight end that's within this startable range, and you haven't done it. There might be one of those guys on waivers and you haven't picked him up. Like, make sure all the little things are dialed in before you say I'm truly in the middle, because sometimes those little things, 5-10% of that work can push you into the top 3 or 4 once the season starts. And you don't want to fire that pick away until you really have to.
Yeah, no, and that brought up a great point, right? Is sometimes the reason that you are in the middle is you perceive yourself as being in the middle and you're just scared to make moves. Literally, what is the worst that can happen? The worst outcome is that the move doesn't pay off. Literally, that's it. And then you start again. And then you still have an asset on your roster and you go, all right, well, now I got to sell it, even if it's at a loss, because that didn't work. I didn't win a championship this year. You know, say the move pays off, but you don't win a championship. Guess what? You didn't win a championship the year before that either. So literally, don't be afraid to make moves. Don't make stupid moves. And I think we know and hopefully see them. And maybe that's why people don't make moves, because they're not sure if they're stupid or not. But don't be afraid to make a trade. Don't be afraid to trade someone like Justin Jefferson if the package is correct. And that's all. That's it for the show. Thank you for tuning in. Mannequin Chill, episode 5,000. Very big episode for us. I know Scott didn't want to say anything, but it's our 5,000th episode, I think, at least. So thanks for tuning in.